Welcome everybody today to the DCMA Symposium, our first one for 2021. We've got some really great speakers and some subject matter experts for you. My name is Chris Merlick. I am the chair of the DCMA and the president of Label Solutions here in Garland. I'd like to thank our sponsor today, Carr, Riggs & Ingram, a CPA and advisory firm, for their support in making this session possible. And with that, I want to turn it over to Frank Burns for a presentation on Carr, Riggs & Ingram. Frank?
All right, so yes, my name is Frank Burns. I'm a partner here at the Dallas office of Carr, Riggs & Ingram. I think Emily is sharing her screen. Yeah, there it is. It just popped up on mine. So Emily, can you jump to the next slide, please? We'll just jump in right quick. Let me tell you a little bit about the background of Carr, Riggs & Ingram here in the Dallas marketplace. Carr, Riggs & Ingram is a firm, you can see from the slides, founded in 97. We're in 10 states, 25 different markets. We are a top 25 CPA firm as ranked by Accounting Today. And we, as a firm, offer your traditional accounting services, accounting, auditing, advisory services, everything from bookkeeping all the way up to tax return compliance. On the accounting test work side, we do audits, reviews, all of that type of stuff. And we work in a number of different industries, which you can see there, captive insurance, construction, but manufacturing is one of our core areas that we look at. And you know, going back to the history of the firm here in Dallas, we are the culmination of two local firms here in Dallas. That was there was a firm called Auerbach, Albert & Gold, and then there was a firm called Philip Vogel or Vogel CPAs. And Carr, Riggs & Ingram merged those two firms to become the Dallas office of their organization. So we have a history here in the firm. And while we are part of the larger operation of CRI, we still consider ourselves a local firm. We operate that way. We spend a lot of time with our clients at the partner level and try to team up with our clients, both on the business, the individual side, to be more than simply a preparer of tax returns or a issuer of reports. We actually look to form strategic partnerships to help our clients manage their business in a more effective manner. We have a number of ancillary companies, which you'll see there in the right-hand side of that slide. Okay, go. That's all right. And these get into different areas. We have a capital advisors firm that, oh, there we go. We're back. So we have a capital advisors firm that gets involved in buying and selling the businesses. We do big data analytics. We have TPA services to deal with retirement plans and that type of stuff. We have an investment branch through Level 4 Advisories, Payworks, which is a payroll client, and then Preferred Legacy Trust, which is, again, a trust company to manage, to hold assets for our clients, typically in retirement plans. So you can jump to the next one now there, Emily. So our industry experience, you know, we do bring a pretty broad team with the size of our firm now. And we have the ability to touch a lot of different areas, and because of the size of our firm now, we're able to bring in outside help to deal with things that may not be specific, and I'll get into that a little bit more in just a minute. But we are very client relationship focused. As I said earlier, we want to be more than just the preparer of tax returns and that type of stuff. We a lot of times work with a team approach to help manage not only the work, but risk, and then just to provide a broad level of points of contact within the firm. For example, anytime I bring on a client, I typically have someone that works with me so that there are always 2 points of contact, where if one of us is out and you need an answer, then you're able to get that answer. And we try to be cost effective. You know, we're not a big four firm, so we certainly try to maintain our cost effectiveness to our clients, because again, we grew up in the Dallas market, and so we understand this market. We understand the fee structures here, and we try to certainly bring that to bear in our relationships, and we look for those long-term successful relationships. So Emily, you want to jump to the next frame, please? I'm told I've got 5 minutes, so excuse me if I'm going really fast. So CRI's manufacturing distribution expertise. So we have a lot of manufacturing clients, and they range in size from smaller firms up to multi-million-dollar firms. You know, I think our annual revenues in this area is totaling about 16.7 billion right now. Our clients go from, you know, 800,000 to 1 million to multi-millions to, as I said, billions. So we kind of broad based there. In my personal experience, you know, I deal with, you know, currently I'm dealing with small precision manufacturing firms for some of which are defense contractor type of stuff to custom auto, when you know it from the Jeep conversation earlier. I deal with some custom automotive manufacturing firms that deal with very specific parts, up to semiconductor manufacturers and other things that do $100 million plus companies, you know. So we see that, we've seen that, and we're certainly able to bring a little bit of help in that area. A lot of our clients use CRI for multiple things, and that was kind of what I was referencing about our family of companies. Not only do we do the tax planning and compliance, which is a big part of what we offer, and the audits and the reviews, but we do things like exit strategy planning. And to plug us a little bit, if you go to our website, we actually have a seminar that's coming up on May 11th that is geared towards manufacturing businesses and transfer ownerships. And it talks to current valuation strategies and just kind of what's going on in the marketplace for manufacturing concerns and what you might need to do if a sale is in your future. So you can find that on our website. And again, that's May 11th where that's coming up. So that, I think that would be something you might be interested in. A couple of areas that we bring to light too, if you'll jump to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We have a group out of that deals with R&D, and that's something that happens in the manufacturing space quite a bit. R&D credit, I don't want to go into the big detail here, but you know, it's for taxpayers that design, develop, improve products, processes, techniques, formulas, and it's not the old guys in the white coats anymore, right? I mean, there's different things that can come into play when we look at R&D for manufacturers. And it doesn't have to be new to the industry. It simply needs to be, you know, an improvement to the activities that are done. And you get the next slide for me, Emily, because I'm going through these pretty quick. So companies need to look at this and consider it. And so we always point this out, you know, and they look at it from a 4-point test. You know, are we eliminating uncertainty? Are we in a process of experimentation? Is it technological in nature, and is there a qualified purpose? So those are the 4 bullet points, and we always like to point that kind of stuff out because a lot of times clients don't really think about that because they are of the ideology that if I'm not developing new software or something like that or bringing a new product to the market, I don't qualify. But that's not always true. Next slide, please. Another thing that's kind of hot right now is the employee retention credit. That helps. Manufacturers have been involved in that. Some of my clients are involved in that. And the employee retention credits are out there right now. And the rules have kind of changed. You know, originally it was if you got a PPP loan, you didn't get the ERC, but now those rules have changed. And so there's kind of some bullet points here that are on these slides, and I'm sure Emily will share these after. You know, if in 19 you had reduction in gross receipts for 1 quarter, you know, you could qualify. Then for 2020, that reduction is even less. So it's something that we like to bring to the table that we get involved with our clients as well, is looking for opportunities to take advantage of things that are happening out there. Somebody mentioned Biden's talk on Earth Day, but you know, Biden also mentioned yesterday about these new potential credits that are coming out for people to get vaccinated by COVID. You know, I'm sure that's something we'll be looking into and bringing up with our clients as well. So we try to stay on top of what's going on in the world and how it might benefit our clients. So that's all about I got right now. You'll hit the last slide there. That's my direct contact information. And Emily, a lot of y'all know Emily and have ran across her. She's our business development person here. And, you know, by all means, reach out to either one of us. And to the extent we can be of help in any way at all, we're happy to have conversations and ask questions, you know. That is key to us, and the way we like to grow our business is by being willing to have conversations. And so please reach out at any time. And also, if you know, check out our website, look for coming events and that type of stuff. There's always something that our marketing people are putting out there in the manufacturing world that might be of interest to you guys. Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you, Frank.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And if you didn't have a chance to write down Emily or Frank's email or phone number, that can be accessed on the Garland Chamber website, or if you guys want to put it in the chat, that's an option as well, Emily and Frank. So thank you for that. So today we have 3 subject matter experts with many years of experience in their field. Our first topic is going to be sustainable manufacturing and water's role in that. And our second topic is the employment law changes that will affect the manufacturing industry with the new administration. And as a reminder, as these presentations are being given, you can use the chat feature to ask any questions you have. And at the end of the program, we'll answer any questions that you have. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Catherine Drumheller and Paul Bowen with GHD. GHD is one of the world's leading professional service companies operating in the global markets of water, energy and resources, environment, property and buildings, and transportation. Established in 1928 and privately owned by their people, they employ more than 10,000 people in 200 offices over 5 continents. And with that, Catherine and Paul, take it away.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm Catherine, and Paul and I are joining you today to chat about the role of water in sustainable manufacturing. And by the way, thank you so much for having us. Laura is helping us out with the PowerPoint today too. So thanks, Laura, for running that in the background. Okay, next slide, please. So in our experience, water risk exists at the intersection of the known and the unknown. These knowns and unknowns are comprised of a combination of both internally and externally driven factors. Okay, next slide. The universe of the known tends to center around operational aspects like rates and volumes, process efficiencies, and past performance. Unknowns tend to be externally driven and arise from a constant change environment that we all operate in. They include things like social and resource risks and constraints, as well as financial risks and constraints. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So, as we all know, changes bring uncertainty, and unanticipated changes bring even more uncertainty. With respect to water, these may include water quality and quantity, as well as changes in social and community factors and regulations, as I'm sure you've all experienced. We were just chatting about some of those in the conversation before the start of the program. The impacts of these unanticipated changes can include increased costs, decreased stakeholder trust, reputational damage, diminished operational capacity, loss of the social license to operate, and importantly, very importantly, reduced revenues. So now I'm going to hand it over to Paul to hear some interesting case studies that will help bring these factors to life.
Well, Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on this call with all of you and to discuss some of the things that we've seen as we've dealt with the unknowns and the knowns in various industries. Next slide. So, as much as we want to be, related with conservation and sustainability, things happen. In this particular case, we had state and federal, the state and the federal government had imposed some guidelines on a particular municipality around phosphorus, and very stringent limits that they were going to have to meet, but prior to discharge. And unknown to this particular industry, the city was planning to impose very strict phosphorus limits upstream in their sewer system to make their job easier on the downstream side. It came out of kind of the blue to this particular industry because phosphorus was a critical compound to their production, and not only as an ingredient, but as in cleaning and the cleaners that they were using to clean the processes. So the city imposed a very stringent phosphorus limit on this industry, saying, you had to meet this, would not give. The alternatives were a violation and fines, which nobody from the industry wanted because of the reputational issues associated with that. So it was a real dilemma. What do you do? How do you get out of, using one of your main ingredients in the processes that were associated with this? So working with the industry, we were able to identify, first of all, some alternate cleaners that were lower in phosphorus, much lower in phosphorus than their existing cleaners. Turned out there was a benefit of that. They were a little bit more costly on a unit basis, but they used significantly less of them in the process. So it turned out to be a cost savings for them. And then we worked with them on how to capture some of their ingredients so that they were able to then reduce the amount of phosphorus going into the stream. Now, this wasn't enough to meet the limit, and so they had to, go in and put in a new treatment process to lower it to the limit. But they were able to be very successful in getting down to that limit and meeting those. But it was a difficult decision, and it caught this industry by surprise that the city would impose those types of limits on them. So we were able to take the unknowns and then turn them into some positives, because we wound up saving them money with addition to the cleaners, but we also saved them money in raw materials going down the drain to the wastewater plant. Next slide. So in this case, it was a very interesting case, because the plant was responding, the industry particular location was responding to a corporate mandate, to conserve water and to meet some corporate sustainability goals around that. And we all know that sometimes those come down the pipe from people who with very good intentions, but people who may not have necessarily worked in an operating facility. So this plant went about this in a very diligent way. They decided they were going to meet the goals. They had been told and had been shown that this would be cost effective for them to reduce the amount of water they were using, and to reduce the amount of wastewater. So it was a big plus for on both ends of the plant. They undertook this, and they didn't really understand, and the unknown was that they were the largest water user and the largest wastewater contributor in the community. And so you can imagine what happens when the municipality sits by and all of a sudden they see less water being used, less wastewater being generated by their largest customer. And they were very upset by this. They aggressively went after the plant. Their first step was to accuse the facility of tampering with the meter and committing meter fraud. So they installed a brand new meter at the front of the plant and a brand new meter on the wastewater side. They were doing, almost daily checks on both ends. They then, when that again revealed that the industry was indeed using significantly less water and then producing significantly less wastewater, they decided that the only way to combat this was to raise the utility rates. So you go from someone who has been told that, hey, this is a way to save money, it's going to help pay for itself, to now all of a sudden you're back up at the same rates that you were. So it was a very disheartening issue for the industry, and all it would have taken, and we tried to work with them on this, was to do some communications, to work with the municipality. But by the time it had gotten to the point where it was, those lines of communications had not been effectively put forth. It's important to understand, the knowns and the unknowns as you deal with any type of sustainability question, because there are things that arise that you may not have direct sight to, or may not have thought of. And so these are just issues that we need to make sure that we can help you understand. In addition to the two case studies here, we also have case studies around quality and other issues. And during the Q&A, we'll be more than happy to discuss those as we move forward. Catherine, back to you.
Thanks, Paul. All right, next slide, please. So, transforming risk into opportunity. Integrated risk management can help transform unknowns into knowns. And GHD works from this perspective with clients every day to provide ongoing support for risk management and understanding, and to help clients cope with the changed environment in which they operate. I feel like the best approaches to sustainability are risk-centered ones, because leveraging an understanding of the environmental, social, governance, and financial aspects of an organization, and understanding that all of those aspects comprise the sustainability system, helps to ensure that a sustainability program is robust and supports the business, but also incorporates necessary changes over time. And the second case study that Paul discussed, I think, is a really important example of that, because we can see that an external driver in the form of the external stakeholder of the municipality, and the drivers for their governance approach were kind of like unknown there. And a risk-centered approach would say, okay, what are all of these external factors that we're dealing with, and then start to examine that so we could potentially identify it before you had the ramifications that happened. So anyway, that's we can go to the next slide, I think. And it's the thank you slide. So thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to answering any of your questions or just chatting during the Q&A.
Thank you, Catherine and Paul. If you want to reach out to Catherine and Paul for any additional questions, I'm sure they'll be available. Ask questions in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation here. Our next topic is going to be employment law changes that will affect manufacturing, anticipating the challenges with reopening and the new political administration. Monica Narvaez is going to be with MKim Legal, is going to be our presenter. MKim Legal was founded on April 1st, 2015, and since then has grown from a two-person law firm to a mid-sized firm with offices in 2 states. MKim Legal provides legal services in the areas of civil litigation, business, and complex commercial litigation. MKim Legal has represented a vast array of clients in litigation, arbitrations, and/or transactional matters, to educational leaders in administrative and due process hearings in a variety of legal claims over the state of Texas and the state of Colorado. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Monica. Monica, take it away.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to test out my Zoom skills here. All right, so far so good.
I can see your screen.
Yay. All right, that was the first test. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And I am just going to give the real high level highlights of, I guess, the big topic issues, the ones that are pertinent right now, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot that is proposed and not necessarily rolled out yet. So I'm going to try to avoid all of those and just stick with what we actually know. And one thing that I will say is my background, I am obviously an attorney, but I started off in human resources. So my approach to presenting the law is to kind of give a sort of a business spin to everything, because I know the practical aspects of the law and how it affects the companies. So with that said, the first thing I wanted to go over is probably everybody had heard of this. It's the American Rescue Plan, and that is the big bill that just got passed for, was it 1.9? I don't even know. I don't know if it's a B or a T or a Z at this point. A lot of money. And within that bill, there were a few things that are affecting employers again as we move through this pandemic. The first one is paid COBRA, and it is essentially if an employer either involuntarily terminates, not for cause, so like a layoff or something like that, or a furlough or something like that, or the employee's hours are cut, and it technically triggers COBRA. So this would mean an employer that actually has some health insurance plan. The cost of the plan is 100% paid basically by the government through a tax credit. So it's something to consider if you're going to be doing layoffs or downsizing. And I know earlier we were talking about companies that are actually having a hard time finding people, and that's a great thing. So hopefully no one ever has to deal with this. But if there is an instance of this, then you have to pay 100% of the COBRA, and then you get a tax credit. The other thing is the COVID, I'm calling it COVID-related leave. Last year, there was the CARES Act, which was the 10 days of leave that people could get for companies that were 500 or under 500 employees. That has been extended. So on April 1st, another 10 days rolled out, and it expanded the use to vaccines. So either you can take the time off to get the vaccine, you can take the time off to get for the after effects of the vaccine. And that is essentially what President Biden was talking about yesterday with encouraging employers to pay for vaccines. It's through this COBRA related leave because there is still the tax credit. So it's not mandatory. I have been getting a lot of questions on that. It's not mandatory like it was last year, but it is highly encouraged. And so it's kind of up to you. That's a business reason. But again, there is a tax credit, 100%, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure Frank could give you better details on that, but you're not going to be out any money. The third thing that was in the American Rescue Plan, which is what's causing a lot of the problems, from whoever's perspective, from the employer's perspective, causing a lot of problems, is this unemployment enhancement. They added back in the $300 bump up per week, and it is doing a couple things. What it's doing is making people want to stay home. So this is causing the shortage of labor. The other thing that it's doing is ramping up people. It's interesting. I'm getting a lot of calls on this. They're trying to get fired. They're trying to get laid off. They're trying to do whatever so they can actually stay at home and get the unemployment because of the enhancement. And this happened last year same thing. And then it stopped when the enhancement went away and people kind of came back to work, and then it started back up again. So I think that the important thing that I always tell my clients is just be very careful to, if somebody does try to get fired, you know, and you're terminating them for cause, fight it through unemployment. Because even though last I heard, Texas was still not charging anybody on their experience for unemployment if they laid people off due to COVID reasons. Eventually there's going to change, and they have been very active about going back to employers and or even people who are receiving benefits and trying to get money. I actually I've represented a couple of just individuals that have gotten letters from TWC saying, we want our money back because you weren't really laid off or you weren't eligible. So that is a thing that's happening. The other thing that is happening is these notices that people are getting saying that unemployment's been filed in their name. This is happening nationwide, and but for Texas, it's, you know, I'm not sure if they're getting it through identity theft or what they're doing, but they are legitimate letters from Texas Workforce Commission because somebody is applying for unemployment benefits on the employee's behalf. Sometimes it goes to the employer. If it's from the employer's perspective, then the employer should fight it through the TWC. And I'm not going to say that that's easy, because I don't think that it is, because you have to sit on hold. But one, you have a duty to, you know, to basically fight the identity theft. But the other thing is you don't want to be charged for somebody that doesn't even work there. It could be a former employee. It could be a current employee. It could be anything. If your employee comes to you and says, hey, I got this notice in the mail, this happened to two of my coworkers, oddly enough, and then they will have to call the TWC. But it's definitely something that needs to be reported and fought to the extent that it's possible, because it is a huge problem and they need to go after people. So the biggest thing is, you know, just kind of keeping on top of the unemployment and the for cause and what's going on, and then keeping up with the laws. All right, let's see here. Hold on one second. Okay. The other thing I wanted to throw in here real quick is, because I am getting a lot of calls on this, and I know that this is going to affect the manufacturing world. OSHA is really ramping up. On March 12th of this year, they actually issued a guidance called the National Emphasis Program. And basically what that was doing is signaling to the world of the United States, but basically to all employers that, hey, we're going to start coming into your businesses. We're going to start sending letters. We're going to start looking for issues. Okay. OSHA was always there, obviously, but to be completely honest, I mean, short of like a workplace hazard or a workplace injury, they weren't as aggressive as they're being now. I've had multiple clients where they literally are going after things like employees that are complaining that they don't have PPE, or they think they got exposed to COVID at work, and they're really following up on that and forcing settlements or forcing hearings. So I throw out the caution in, just so that basically everybody is already doing this, I'm sure, because in the manufacturing world, you're already kind of under a microscope. But just make sure that you're following whatever duties under the general duty clause for OSHA, which is really what this falls under. You are making sure that you're following to a T what you're supposed to be doing. And the best way to do that is, in full interest of disclosure, I used to work for the government a million years ago. And so I always put my government hat on when I'm giving advice now, because the best way to fight the government is to use their own words against them. So to the extent that you're following OSHA guidance, CDC guidance, any state, county, municipal, or whatever city guidance, that the better. So just make sure that you are tracking PPE, because that's, you know, still an issue. And then obviously if there's hazards or known issues, you want to document that. You want to document cleaning to the extent, because I don't think that that has gone away. So it's just a matter of keeping on top of things. And then the more information that you have to give to the investigator when they come in, the better. All right, so next slide. And masks. Okay, everybody hates them. Well, maybe not everybody. And by everybody, I guess I mean me, but they're still required in most places. So you don't have to, obviously, in Texas, because it's up to the government, or sorry, up to the employer. But for the most part, most companies are enforcing them. And this is going to be this is where the politics comes in. Because on a federal level, masks are still very encouraged. So OSHA is going to be expecting masks, social distancing, all of that when they're looking for hazards. So just keep that in mind. You got to obviously weigh the balance of what your employees want to do, but just for liability purposes from the employer's perspective, you want to make sure that you're keeping a pulse on the politics, I guess, so that you can know where you might have to defend if the government comes calling. All right, so what are the best practices in general? And because I'm an attorney, this is what I tell everybody, but for sure in the employment world, this documentation is your best friend. So document, 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 and document some more. And that is a good way to combat the fraud, because there are a lot of cases where, like, say, for example, I just settled a case with OSHA on behalf of an employer client where the employee literally walked off the job, literally, in the middle of her shift. And because she was mad about something, filed an OSHA claim saying that it was in retaliation for, I think she wanted to quarantine for a couple weeks because she was going to go see her parents. They didn't let her because they didn't have to, and they needed her there. It was an essential business. And she walks off the job. They fire her for that, and she files a claim. So long story short, 6 months later, they're paying, a couple $1,000s just to basically get rid of her. And it's just mostly because they didn't have a lot of documentation. So the more documentation that you have to show why you're doing what you're doing in any time, but so outside of the pandemic, but definitely within the pandemic. So you've got workers' comp fraud, you've got OSHA fraud. There's the explosion of lawsuits is happening right now for people that are filing things like, I got exposed to COVID, or there's probably going to be cases of, we joke as lawyers because we're nerds, and we will say, in 20 years from now, you're going to hear that, were you exposed to excessive hand sanitizer, whatever. That's the kind of things that the documentation is going to be important. So the next thing is just be vigilant with your workplace hazards and injuries. And when one happens, make sure that your employees know that they have to report it, because they do. And then you follow your guidance for reporting under whatever workers' comp system you follow. If you're a subscriber, then you're going to have protocols. If you're a non-subscriber, then you got different protocols. But just make sure that you're keeping track of these things. And then create a solid strategy in advance of employee terminations and layoffs. And what I mean by this is, again, document. Make sure that you have a rationale and support for everything that you're doing, because right now we're sort of in a world of discrimination claims are way up, harassment claims are way up, because the political environment is more conducive to those types of claims, meaning that the Department of Labor and the EEOC are more likely to entertain the claims and actually pursue them. So you want to make sure that you've got documentation to say, no, it wasn't workers' comp retaliation or OSHA retaliation. It was because the person didn't come to work for 3 weeks, right? Stuff like that. So that is what I'm talking about, as far as just make sure you've got all your ducks in a row when you're dealing with employee issues. All right, so now we're going to move on to what is right now the hot topic, vaccines. So what are the legal issues around vaccines? I'm putting, you can see on the screen that there's multiple laws, and I'm just going to give a little blurb about all of them and then focus on three main topics. The legal issue with workers' comp right now, and again, none of this is actually set in stone. We're sort of literally in a blazing a trail in the legal world, because the last time we had a pandemic was the swine flu pandemic in 2009, and there were no vaccines for that. There still are no vaccines for that. And it wasn't obviously to the extent that COVID has. There were no shutdowns. There were schools that were shut down, but it wasn't this extent. So what you've got going on here is a bunch of enterprising lawyers making claims, basically. So workers' comp, one of the things that has been percolating up is workers' comp for getting COVID at work, that could potentially be an issue. But now the new thing is if employers are mandating vaccines. Some of the lawsuits that have arisen are, if you're mandating a vaccine and then something happens to that person, okay, either they get sick, that's going to be covered under workers' comp, probably, right? Because it's a workplace injury. Or if they die, same thing. Or if they have long-term effects, same thing. So consider workers' comp when you are either mandating your vaccines, or another thing that has happened, there's been some employers that have done like vaccine buses or something like that. They'll come to the work site. To the extent that you can, let whoever the provider is maintain that. It's maybe it's in the parking lot, but it's off-site. It's not seen as the employer mandating it, but that could be an issue because, you know, you've got a bus coming in and you got peer pressure, and some employees probably going to say, well, I felt like I had to, and I slipped and fell on the way to the vaccine bus, and, you know, now you got a workers' comp issue. So just be careful of that. ERISA is an area of law. It's insurance law, basically. And so there are attorneys that practice specifically in ERISA. But one thing that I wanted to throw out there, because I have had this come up for my clients, is if you mandate vaccines, are you considered a healthcare provider? If you're bringing them on site, are you a healthcare provider? It's just something to consider, and you might want to get an opinion of an ERISA attorney for if you do decide to mandate the vaccines and or bring them on site, because you don't want to be a healthcare provider. I mean, you know, some people are self-insured, but for the most part, we're not, and it just opens up a whole new area of law. HIPAA is another big one. In that if you're mandating the vaccines, are you getting impermissible medical information from your employees? Maybe not. Maybe it's just going to HR like normal FMLA or Americans with Disabilities Act accommodation information would do. But if you are asking for, you know, medical records because you want the medical records or a release before you give the shot, then that could potentially trigger HIPAA. Now, you can ask an employee to prove that they've had a vaccine. If you're gonna decide that you want to have vaccines for your staff, then, you know, you want them to show you whatever, the card from the CDC, then you can do that. But if they don't have one and they refuse or something like that, don't start asking medical questions of why, because then you're getting into potential HIPAA violations. So that's something to consider. The NLRA stands for the National Labor Relations Act. And I threw that in here because this is an area that President Biden is really focusing on, unionization and basically collective bargaining and things like that. The issue that has come up with vaccines is the right of employees to discuss issues, so workplace issues at work. They legally, you have to allow your employees to be able to discuss workplace issues, so terms and conditions of employment. And if you mandate vaccines, then that potentially could be considered a term or condition of employment, and employees, pro or con, they have the ability to discuss that at work. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're, if you hear people talking about whatever, don't, make sure that you're not violating their National Labor Relations Act rights. And then the final one is the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's the FLSA. If you're mandating the shot, you do need to give the employee time off to go get the shot. And then any time that if they have adverse reaction. So it's because it's considered work time. That's what the DOL is saying right now. There's really not law on this, but the DOL we got to go with because they kind of make the rules. But you can use those 10 days that's on the American Rescue Plan. So just consider that if you're gonna mandate. Now, the bigger issues with mandating, hold on one second. Okay, these are the big red flags. Here is where the fights are going to happen, and they are to a certain extent already. And this is only if you are considering to mandate the vaccines. You need to be careful for people that are disabled or have a religious belief or are potentially pregnant. Okay, you might not know, but whatever. So I'm going to go into each of these real quick so that you can have an idea of the issues that you could be wading into. With disability, some people have been, because the important thing to remember is right now the vaccine is, it's only approved for emergency use. So it's not even a real vaccine, right? So this is why the law is not very settled, because there's never been an emergency use only vaccine that has been mandated to be given to people. So again, wild, wild west of the legal world. And people that are disabled, there are people that are being told by their doctors that they shouldn't take the shot, right? So if that happens and somebody comes to you and says, I don't want to take the shot because my doctor, you need to treat it like you would any other request for accommodation under the ADA. So you're going to need to engage in what's called the interactive process and see if you can find an accommodation. Can they telework? Can you just give them PPE? Can they socially distance? All of those things. If there's a way to fix it so that the person doesn't have to get the shot if you're going to mandate it, right? The other thing that's going to go into that is everybody else already vaccinated and this person is really going to create a direct threat to the workplace. That's the actual test you're looking for. If it's not likely they're going to present a direct threat, do you really need them to get vaccinated? Because the other thing that's going on here is nobody knows if you can still spread the virus if you've got the vaccine, or we've all heard that you can still get the virus if you've vaccinated also. So this is a really shaky area of law right now. The other thing that's under disability, this is an issue under ADA in general, is if you give incentives to get a shot. If you give incentives, you need to be very careful, because if somebody who is disabled can't get the shot, they're not going to get the incentive. So say you give a day off, something like that. That is probably going to violate the Americans with Disabilities Act, because the disabled people who can't get it don't get the day off. There's a lot of discussion out there right now of what is too much, what's too little. Maybe like a gift card of $25 would be okay, but a day off is probably not going to be okay. So just watch for that if you're going to do some incentives. With the religious exemptions, that's a little bit harder. It does have to be a sincerely held religious belief, but how do you test that? And it's going to be one of those things where, say, for example, I'll just use Catholic as an example. They have an issue with the Johnson & Johnson one because it's got aborted fetal cells in it. But do they have an objection to Moderna or Pfizer, which doesn't? right? So you're going to need to go through the analysis, see if there's some sort of an accommodation you can do with the people that have a religious objection. And then the last one is pregnancy. It's not disability, because pregnancy is in itself is not a disability, but there's two issues that go on with pregnancy. They might not want to tell their employer that they're pregnant because they don't want to get fired, basically. So if you're mandating it, you're forcing them to tell you that they're pregnant. So that's maybe an issue. They could be considered disabled if their doctor says, no, you've got these pre-existing conditions. I don't want you to take the shot. So, don't do it. That could fall under disability. Then you have to accommodate. And then the other thing is, for all three of these, if they say no, and then they mess up one day and they're terminated, it's going to look like retaliation. So just be very careful when if you're going to be mandating vaccines or highly encouraging vaccines, because it's kind of fraught with a lot of issues. So what are the best practices then? Consider a slow rollout if you're going to do a vaccine policy, because you don't want to have business interruptions. So if there are people that have adverse reactions, you want to make sure that you've got enough people to work should somebody need to be out for a couple days or a week. My advice, not legal advice because you're not engaged, but in general, I would encourage it. Don't mandate it. It's just a safer route right now until the law gets a little more settled. Consider the accommodations. If somebody asks, consider it. And keep up to date on this de minimis gift idea for taking the vaccine. And again, there's a ton of articles out there. I think Kroger is giving like $500. All these big companies are doing it. It doesn't mean it's legal just because big companies are doing it. Just take that into consideration, that you potentially are exposing yourself to a lawsuit, but it's a cost benefit analysis, and still require masks, social distancing, etc. All right, real quick. This is my last slide, I promise. So overall, what I would say is just keep reviewing OSHA's guidance, because OSHA is going to be a driver going forward, OSHA and the Department of Labor. But OSHA they have some pretty significant penalties behind their actions. And so the government, as we all know, is completely broke. So they look to regulatory agencies to generate income. And I know this because I've seen it. So OSHA is going to be one of the ways that they're going to be generating income going forward. So just make sure you're on top of the OSHA guidance and the CDC guidance. And with that, there is my contact information. If anybody would like a copy of this, I can send it and you guys can have it. But that is me then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Great presentation. Anybody with any questions, feel free to reach out to her. We did have a couple questions in the chat there. Monica, can companies do anything with employees that don't want to get vaccinated? I guess we've kind of gone over that for the most part. I don't know that.
I can jump in. The one thing that I would say that is important for that is you have to assess what your business, if people are working on top of each other, right? And you are down to a skeleton staff and you really need people to be at work all the time, maybe that would be okay for mandating vaccines if there's no other way to accommodate. So look at it like you would any other disability. If you just really need that person there and they are a direct threat to everybody because they're not wearing masks, they're out partying every weekend, they're going to bring COVID into the workplace, that would be the analysis. So
okay. And then our second question was, what can we do if an individual refuses to wear a mask when visiting a site when it's clearly stated at the door that masks are required?
That would be a situation of if you could give them a direct order, they have to wear it. Because even though it's not a state mandate, the law says that the businesses can require it. So they have to respect the business that they're going into. It's a part of their job. It's an essential function of their job if they're visiting a site to follow the rules of the site. So they can be mandated to have to wear the masks. And if they don't, then whatever your disciplinary policy says for dealing with people that don't follow orders.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions that they want to direct to Monica or to Catherine or Paul regarding their presentation? No? Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, I sent Catherine a note. I mean, obviously, what struck a chord in the case study was the relationship between the regulatory agency, in this case, water departments, and we've got some pretty significant water users in Garland, and we work really hard at building relationships. What guidance in terms of proactive? I know, Paul, I really took your comments to heart about after the fact. You did good for the company and pulled a major income source away from the city. So, in your experience, what are some of the proactive things, to mitigate those kinds of situations?
That's a really good question, Paul. And that common name thing here between Paul and Paul is what's going on. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we tried to do was to early on, when in this particular case, we went back and tried to do a risk analysis and use that going forward, and that was to help the industry understand what their risks were. And one of those, in other cases, we found similar cases where they knew they were the largest supplier in town. So the big thing there is to go to the municipality, tell them what you're going to do, but also be able to explain the benefits of what you're doing to them. And in one case, we were able to go to the municipality and said, hey, we're going to be reducing our water use by significant amounts. But what this does is this frees up additional capacity for you, so you don't have to build a new plant. You don't have to ask for that bond. And they seem to accept that. We didn't get in trouble with the other location, but that's the type of conversations that you'd have. It can't just be, oh, we're going to reduce water to look good. No, as it is with everything, there's got to be something in it for me. And so that's the message that you have to convey to them. Plus, you can always spin it publicly. We're going to reduce our water use, to help the environment, to help the community have more water, and let that play out in that fashion as well.
Good, excellent. And we're in a place that goes off and on with droughts, and so water conservation is a good deal. So I appreciate what y'all do. We appreciate having Jake. So
well, droughts are. I mean, and it's kind of what maybe I'm stealing Catherine's thunder a little bit, but I think whenever you use water as a resource, you need to do a risk analysis on that particular source. Is the city planning on raising revenue in 5 years? Are they going to drill extra wells? What are the risks that you face with that source? And if you can identify those, then you can mitigate them, and it saves everybody a lot of headaches.
Yes, you're exactly right, Paul. I mean, that's it. And something that I was going to mention just quickly is that if it's part of, you have to make these evaluations iteratively. So if you have a process in place to look at what's going on, maybe on a biannual or annual or whatever your area demands, it can even be 5-year basis. But if there are vulnerabilities associated with population growth, and that the water resource is scarce, then you probably want to do it more often. And so you can realign yourself with what's going on with the municipal governments and how they're managing their water resources, and then reach out to them in a proactive way as part of your periodic review process.
I just wrote down note to self. Wes Kucera, and Jake knows him. He's the head of our water department here, and we work really hard. We've got some significant water users. Some of them are on this call today. Get you back and just do a water summit, just the whole thing.
Great idea.
Yeah, we would be glad to help with that. There's a lot of good case studies out there that we can bring on the value of doing those risks early on.
Definitely.
The other note to self for all the folks that are looking for employees, I sent a note to Stephen Bridges with Texas with Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas about creating an employment summit about all the resources. So we'll be looking to bring those to you quickly on terms of getting more people to work and dealing with water. So appreciate everybody. Thanks for indulging my questions.
Yes, thank you, Paul and Catherine for that stuff. I agree that, being proactive and spinning it as a win-win to the city before you do anything is good sound advice for sure.
Real
I
quick,
think that does it on the Q&A segment. I want to thank our sponsor, Carr, Riggs and Ingram, Frank and Emily. Thank you for your presentation. Again, if you have any questions regarding PPP or any other accounting type questions, their contact info is in the chat there. I'd like to thank our speakers, Catherine and Paul with GHD, Monica Narvaez with the MKim Legal for their time and their valuable contribution to our DCMA community. The bios that were sent with the invitation, you can learn more about them, just referring back to that email. We put out a lot of information to everybody today. So we appreciate your attendance, and we recorded the event, and so we'll be sending that back out to people. If you missed anything, if you want to reevaluate what we presented to you today, there'll be a recording sent to you, and we're going to send a survey as well. Please fill that survey out. It's valuable information for us at the DCMA on programming these events, and we have another one coming up in July. Before I give you that information, I also want to thank Rick Guerrero and Christina Lawson with the DCMA for their work and what they do in presenting these symposiums to you guys. The next DCMA symposium is Thursday, July 29th from 10:30 to noon. And we'd love to see you there. We'll be sending emails out. And once we get the programming tidied up with that, then again, fill those surveys out, and that'll help us decide what we need to bring you guys next. And with that, any other questions, comments, concerns?
just a real quick comment. By the way, just wanted to say thank you to Monica and the GHD team. They are members of the Resource Council that we have under the DCMA. Also, Kimberly Wilkins, she's another member of the Resource Council. And please feel free to reach out to them whenever you have any questions on these subject matters. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Rick. With that, I'll move to adjourn. If anyone wants to stay behind in the meeting chat room here, we can discuss more, or if you want to move on with your day, we're going to adjourn. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.